Good morning. Today is Wednesday, September. And this is the Arlington County Board of Equalization hearing. We have 5 cases on the agenda. The first case is RPC 16039-033. Ms. Eileen Borman and Mr. Harmon are here to represent the owners. They have asked to take 15 minutes to discuss the first 3 cases. The county's in agreement with that. So I'm not sure who's going to speak, but whoever is going to speak can go ahead and tell us about the background on these 3 cases.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the board. Good morning. These 3 cases are all subject to the same planned development site plan. It's number 422. This PDSP combined 2 prior site plans, and the planning process for this started in February of 2012. It was adopted 4 years later in March of 2016 with a change in zoning to Roslyn CO. Just as an example of how long things can take to get done, and I'm sure some of the people on the board have been through this process before, but to get this PDSP passed took 17 meetings, 4 years and a month. And there were attorneys, architects, engineers, traffic consultants, landscape architects all involved in the process. So it's a very complex and time-consuming process. The amount of density approved under the PDSP is not at issue. What is at issue is what could be done with that density as of January 1. As an aside or of importance is that this PDSP is assessed in a uniform manner. The county assessed all the land subject to this PDSP the same. Last year, this property was appealed and the county differentiated between the development density that could be built as of January 1, 2020, and the development density that was still subject to 4.1 or site plan. What I'd like to do is start by showing you what is at issue and what we are looking for. And to do that, I'm going to share my screen and show a page from the appeal. This is page 4 of the appeal. And what you can see here highlighted in green is the existing density at the site. And that is valued at $65,249,280. We have no complaints about that valuation. Then there is additional PDSP density. Now, Mr. Harmon will get into how that density has to be purchased or the consideration for that density later on in this presentation. Last year, the county, in its review of this case, reduced the value of the additional PDSP density to 40% of the uniform rate. So you can see here, hopefully you can see my cursor, it's 65 and then 0.4 of $65 per square foot of FAR. And the same thing was done for the retail, the apartment, the hotel, and then the total would have been $112,636,965 if it was assessed at 100%, but at 0.4%, it was assessed at $45,054,786. So the total assessment, the land assessment, is $110,304,066. Again, the existing density at 100% of the uniform rates, and the PDSP density at 40% of the rate. What we are asking for is, and this is page 4 of the appeal package, is on page 75 of the appeal package, and I'll just put it up there. So basically, you can see the existing density, I have it highlighted in green for go, is at the same rate as the county's. But then we believe that the land, or the right to pay compensation for the additional density is no longer worth 40% of the $65 or 40% of the $86,000 per unit. We believe that because of the change in market conditions and the speculative nature of the development, which Mr. Harmon will get into further, that this value should be 25% of what it would be. And that would be a value of $28,159,300. Another way to look at it is what was the cost to get this additional density? Because probably, anybody that's in the Roslyn market could apply for and get this. So the cost of achieving that density for all those attorneys, architects, engineers, et cetera, is less than the $28,159,000. I don't have the exact figure, but that is another way of looking at it. We also believe that the demolition costs associated with the existing structures at the property should be deducted, and that would get you, that's another $3 million. That gets you to the $90,331,000 that's here. And then that value is divided by the total number of square feet and allocated among the various parcels. So the difference in value is we are looking for $356.83 per square foot. And in the county's assessment, both January 1, 2020 and January 1, 2021, that value is at $435.72 per square foot. So that is how the case breaks down and what we are looking for. And I'm going to turn the podium over, so to speak, to Mr. Harmon. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Yes, thank you, Eileen. Madam Chairwoman, members of the board, good morning. As Eileen said, these parcels were rezoned in 2016 to CO Roslyn. The additional building height and additional density provided for in the rezoning are contingent upon the taxpayer offering compensation to the county via community benefits that are above the base amounts established by the Arlington County zoning ordinance. You can see this on page 67 of the appeal pack. That is item number 40 there on 67 mentions that the community benefits will be above the base amounts. The value of the density is also speculative, as the community benefits that will be required by the rezoning have not been determined. And as the rezoning states, if you turn to page 48 of the appeal packet, you'll see it states that the benefits cannot be determined until an application is made by the owner. So as of the date of value, January 1, 2021, plans for additional buildings did not exist. The property had not received 4.1 site plan approval. The additional density had not been purchased via the community benefits, nor could its value be determined as set forth on the staff report on page 48 again. So at issue in this case is not the value of the additional density, but rather the value of what exists as of the date of value, which is the right to purchase the additional density. Clearly, per the rezoning document, without the payment of compensation via those community benefits, you cannot build more than what currently exists. The potential development, again, is speculative as of the date of value, both in the form of the final plans we'll take and the cost of approval of those plans. The economic support for pursuing such a large-scale development as outlined by the rezoning significantly declined over the course of 2020, resulting in a fair market value that is much less as of January 1, 2021 than it was on January 1, 2020. The assessment kept the value the same. It basically said the value of this potential development is exactly the same January 1, 2020 as it is January 1, 2021, despite the global pandemic. Quite simply, the market for office space in the county is much less favorable on January 1, 2021 than it was 1 year prior. We're all aware of the COVID-19 pandemic and the effects it has had on the office, retail, and hotel markets. Over the course of 2020, from January 1 to January 1, 2021, office rents are down, leasing velocity is down, vacancy is up, sublet space available is up. Clearly, these are all detriments to potential development sites, especially large ones such as the subject. As of the date of value, no one knew where the market for office space was heading. We knew where it had been. It had gone down over 2020. Where it was going to go, no one knew we still probably don't. But as of the date of value, nearly 200,000 new cases of COVID were being diagnosed per day in the US. Work from home policies had proven successful, and employers were evaluating the feasibility of permanent work from home or hybrid work policies. The hotel and retail markets were even worse. All of these factors contribute to the fact that the economic feasibility of pursuing a large redevelopment, such as Roslyn Plaza, was much worse as of January 1, 2021, than it was on January 1, 2020. Yet again, the assessment remained the same. No detriment to the assessment based on all of the market conditions that have changed over the past year. Again, the owner had not begun to pursue 4.1 site plan approval as of the date of value. The rezoning was approved in 2016. No redevelopment is planned in the foreseeable future, as again, the economic feasibility simply is not there. The owner has mentioned that something like a very large tenant would have to come in, another Amazon HQ for them to pick this one up quickly. There are no drivers for demand to support a development of this scale as of the date of value. And as Eileen touched upon, rezoning plans of this magnitude can take years to complete once the decision to proceed has been made. As an example, the Pentagon City Phase Development Site Plan was initially approved decades ago and still has yet to be fully built out. So when this rezoning will be acted upon is speculative as of the date of value. The rezoning also only states a procedure to request a value for those community benefits that are required in order to obtain the outlined density and height. Again, that leads to the speculativeness of the rezoning. It is the right to buy the additional density upon approval of those yet unknown plans and yet unknown contingent community benefits, not the actual density that existed on the date of value. This is what should be assessed, and this value has decreased over the past year. Regardless of the legal status of the rights to additional density for this property, there is simply no way that the economic feasibility of the redevelopment is the exact same on the date of value, January 1, 2021, as it was 1 year prior. Again, the market for office, retail, and hotel properties as of the date of value had fundamentally shifted from 1 year prior, and we believe the assessment should reflect as much. In sum, what we're asking is for you to recognize the speculative nature of the potential development, recognize that the owner must purchase the rights to the additional density, and recognize, most importantly, that the value for this type of asset has decreased from January 1, 2020 to January 1, 2021. We believe, as Eileen stated, that either the cost of rezoning a property from CO to CO Roslyn or 25% of the uniform rate most accurately captures the fair market value of the right to buy density that existed on January 1 at this property. This results in the value set forth on page 75 of the appeal pack. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Mr. Rob Peralta for the county, please.
Yes, good morning, board. This case is similar. It includes the case that we heard prior in yesterday's BOE. With respect to this particular cases, the next three cases, we're dealing with the same argument where the FER did change for this property. We believe that the PDSP can be sold. At this point, it's one step further in the process, and there is a change from the value initially. This PDSP is valued similarly to other PDSPs in the county. We have Met Park, Costco site, and Penn Place. This particular PDSP has been valued at the largest deduction compared to the other PDSPs. Again, it's at 60% reduction, so we're valuing at 40% of the value. Looking at the this particular PDSP. Recently, there was a VDOT purchase of a VDOT parcel purchased. Just recently, it's another step towards, achieving this PDSP. When looking at a particular sale that occurred in the county of similar nature, Met Park sold at $72 per square foot. When looking at this valuation for this particular year, we're at $43.57 per square foot. So again, in comparison and looking at an actual sale that did occur of similar nature, we're valuing this property at a lower rate than what has sold in the market. Was there anything else you'd like to add, Irving?
Yeah, I can jump in. So, and the reason why the sale that Rob mentioned is important because of size. So the size of the Met Park density was around 2,152,000 square feet of density. That sale was after the final site plan, but it was originally approved for apartments. Then when Amazon came in and chose that site, they worked with the county to go back to the PDSP and convert that apartment density to office density. After that was approved and they got their 2.15 million square feet of office density, it was sold for $72 a square foot. The reason we point that out is to show how much of a discount we're applying to this site plan, or this PDSP rather, based off of the nature of PDSPs. The total density for this site, based off the owned lot size at the time of the approval, is 2,531,660 square feet. And again, if you take that density and divide it by the total lot size, total land value of 110,304,100 we have on this whole block, that comes out to the 40 some dollars that Rob is referring to. And again, that includes the density that is already built out. We value PDSPs in this manner for years. Oftentimes discussing the valuation process with Ms. Borman. We've always looked at PDSPs and we looked at the total density approved. We've applied a discount based off phasing. And that was the approach that we took with Penn Place. That's the approach we took with Costco. That's the approach we took with Met Park up until Amazon purchased that property. Right now, for example, just to talk about how PDSPs are often converted or changed or renegotiated over time, the density for Penn Place was around 1.8 million. We all know right now, based off articles, that Amazon negotiating to have it increase to around about 2 million or more, similar to Met Park, and they will purchase it once that approval is given. The same as this. The community benefits are not determined right now because the community benefits for Rosalind Plaza it involves the park, Rosalind Plaza Park. Each phase they will build a park. Depending on when that phase is started and completed, determines how much they will have to contribute to the cost of the park. So you can't say how much the contributory value that any person would have to pay is right now, because the park may not be built until 10, 15 years down the line. And even then, depending on what studies are going on in the county, depending on what direction the county may want to go to at that time period, they may even eliminate the park. They may say you don't have to do the park. So that's why it is discounted. That's why the contributory value can either be determined by our department or the appellant because of the time period in which these properties, these phases may be started. I think it's important to go back to like what Eileen said. This process started in 2012. There were 17 site plan review committee meetings for this property. As she stated, the countless hours put into this by the owners and the county equates to value of this land in this PDSP. It goes to show that if they were to sell this PDSP, they wouldn't sell it for a lower amount. They would take in consideration how much time they put into getting this PDSP approved, how much time they took to get this rezoning put in place. They were also taking consideration the money they spent on the VDOT parcel. And that's why we discounted, but that's why we believe our value is appropriate. I mean, we had a discussion about this very PDSP last year with the appellant, and this was the method in which we used to lower that value, the 2020 value. I do believe the appellant agreed at the time to that value. Since then, like we said, Amazon bought 2.1 million square feet of density for $72 a square foot. Right at the end of 2019, which I know is before COVID, but we had a site plan that was approved on Fairfax Drive that sold for $88 a square foot. And here we are applying 40 some dollars a square foot per density to this site. Quite honestly, we don't believe they provided us with any evidence that we should change our value. And then, like Rob alluded to, other site plans were valued, such as Penn Place, were still valued off the old method of discount. So in actuality, this property did receive a higher discount than other PDSPs for 2021. We'll make those corrections in 2022 to make sure everybody's valued the same. But this property right now does have a higher discount when you take into consideration all of the undeveloped density is discounted at 60%. I think that's all I have.
Just so I can get the last word. I'm representing the valuation for Spectrum Theater, which ends in RPC 034. I just want to echo what Irving and Rob, just a brief note that the zoning changed at the time it was approved. So we now have a zoning of CO Roslyn. Also, the FAR changed from 3.8 to 10.0. And to reiterate, we are discounting this valuation by 60%. That's all that I have to say. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Hoffman.
I've got a couple just about the PDSP in general. Background. I'll ask the county and then maybe anybody else that needs to chime in. But I'm just curious about is there an expiration on the PDSP? I know sometimes it's good for 5 years, sometimes good for 10. Barnes is shaking his head. And then the other question is, are there any ground leases on the property or anything that we should be aware of, or is this just a fee simple ownership?
So I would agree with Barnes. There's really not much of a expiration. I think they put it in the plan, but as we know, you can come forth and do multiple amendments. I think PDSPs typically have 25-year expiration. They want you to come, I think within 5 years. Let me just see if I can go back and pull it up. But it's like within 5 years to start on the first PDSP, first phase or whatever, and things of that nature. But let me make sure that's correct.
Okay, and then I guess maybe Ms. Borman, is there a ground lease on this site, or is this just fee simple?
My understanding is it is fee simple, and that there is one building that is leased long-term, is not subject to, not the building we talked about yesterday, but does have long-term leases in it. There's also 2 apartment houses on the property.
Okay.
Okay, other questions? No.
Oh,
Mr. Hoffman.
I'm just thinking. I was writing a few down while we were listening to the presentation. Ms. Borman, you referred to the cost of rezoning, or I think George, maybe Mr. Harmon mentioned the cost of rezoning. Following up on your presentation, are you talking about the costs that were incurred with all the? You said the 17 board meetings and the legal fees and all that. Is that what you're referring to, or are you talking about future costs that are going to be, That's some.
No, I'm talking about the cost what it took to get the rezoning passed. And I'm saying it's substantially less than the $28 million that we're asking for the land to be valued at.
Okay.
Okay, other questions? No? Okay, would Mr. Peralta or Ms. Roskin, if you'd like to wrap up?
I'll defer to Rob.
All right. Again, we'd just like to reiterate, that there was time and attention spent on approving the PDSP. We believe it's more valuable given the change in FAR from 3.8 to 10. Again, we're valuing this property or this land in particular at $43.57 compared to the most recent sale of a similar property at Met Park sold to Amazon at $72 a square foot. In the board yesterday, there was a statement made by one of the board members where, the density or the actual office can be exchanged for apartment. It's interchangeable in that nature, but yet the density remains the same. And that's what we're talking about here today. The density, again, is, like I mentioned, at $43.57 per square foot. And that should be valued as such. I believe that's all I have. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Irving?
Okay,
I just wanted to follow up on what Greg said.
Mr. Bailey, hold on one second. Ms. Borman, are you sharing your screen?
Yes, she is.
Yeah, can you take that down while they're presenting their side? Ms. Borman?
It looked like she froze.
Yes, she froze.
It's disruptive. I thought Mr. Peralta, you were trying to show us something.
No.
So while we're frozen, I guess take the time to try to answer what Greg mentioned. So as far as looking at the board report, I looked through the documents. I didn't see a expiration date, but one thing that was noted is that the PDSP doesn't have to be built out concurrently. So that goes back to what Rob said and what Barnes talked about and what we've noted with other PDSPs in the county. The density approved doesn't change. The use often changes, and we've seen that with Penn Place, Met Park, where they had they had over 1 million square feet of office, and then they came to the board and said, can we convert this to apartments? And at one point they had hotels, and they said, we don't want to do hotels. Can we convert this to apartments or retail space? So that's common practice with PDSPs. I think it's because it's such a large block, the amount of time is given to fulfill these plans, and you're also given a lot of leeway to be able to make changes to your plan based off what's going on in the market. So if office is doing bad, they would come to the board and say, hey, can we convert this to multifamily, because multifamily is doing great. And that's often accepted on those final site plans. But we're just saying that there's value in this additional density. You look at the entire 2 million plus square feet of density, it's valued around $40 some a square foot. Our actual site plan and existing office land rate is $65 a square foot in metro area. So that shows that there's a discount right there. If you compare it to the most recent sale of density at this size, which was $72 per square foot, again, we're much lower than that as well. And we think the 60% discount on the undeveloped density is appropriate. That's all I have.
Just to reiterate, demolition cost is already factored into purchase price. So we do not believe in applying additional demolition costs. When a buyer purchases a property, they've already factored that into their sale price. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Borman or Mr. Harmon, if you'd like to take a minute to wrap up.
Sure. I think that it's very important to talk about a couple of different things. First, it's really very incorrect to compare something that has been site plan approved to something that has not been site plan approved. This, you have to ask yourself the question, did this density actually, could the owners have built this density on January 1? And the answer to that is in the document creating the rezoning. And on page 28, and I'm just going to read it, until such time as the Roslyn applicant submits final site plan application for development of the site in conformance with the Roslyn Plan PDSP, no community benefits analysis will be performed because determining the value of any density would be inaccurate due to constantly changing market conditions. Now, why is that important? It's important for the very reasons that Mr. Bailey also mentioned. You know, nobody really knows what's going to be built on this property. But what we have as of January 1 is what is set forth in this staff report. Then if you look at page 67 of the appeal, here's where the developer agrees and the county states that the developer agrees that the density for the phase site plan is subject to the developer's offering of important community benefits as compensation. I get compensation for my work. It's called pay. This is the same thing. The developer has to pay for the additional building height and density above the base amounts established by the Arlington County zoning ordinance, as determined by the county board with approval of each final site plan. So we don't have a site plan. We're years away from creating a site plan. We have a situation where this is not comparable to Penn Place. That property was site planned in, I think, in the 70s, and it's taken almost 45, 50 years to be developed. It's still not fully developed. This property is not close to the airport. It is not close to the Pentagon. It does not have good access in Roslyn. It is a property that's going to require a Google or a Microsoft relocating to this county in order to trigger the development. The owners have no plans in the foreseeable future. It is years away unless something miraculous happens. And we are not saying, contrary to what may or may have not been said, but what I heard was that we are saying there's no value in this property. That's not correct. And we are not saying that there is no value in the fact that it does have PDSP approval and the change in zoning to Roslyn CO.
Okay, I'm going to need you to wrap up because you've well extended past.
All right, on page 75, you can see the value, which is, we believe, of $28,159,000 prior to demolition for the additional development density. The market is clearly different from January 1, 2020 to January 1, 2021. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, can you take that off the screen?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. It takes me a second. Thank you.
Okay, it's just among the board now. What's everybody think? Mr. Lawson.
Okay, I guess I'll go ahead and start. You know, I do land use work. I don't do it like I used to, but we did Met Place and we did Pentagon City. And what's being described by the applicant is just not the reality of the value of a site plan. And the applicant's done a very elegant job of trying to chisel away at the value, but a phase development site plan is a vested thing. And that density is there and the owner chooses when they want to utilize it. The community benefits that are being discussed are actually involved in every single zoning that I've done in the last 15 years. And that the term community benefits became was actually created by Barbara Favola when she was on the board. And they look at things such as providing to the community a meeting room, transportation improvements, things of that nature, things that add to the value of the applicant's project as well as just to the community. There are some things that are just straight contributions, such as to the housing fund, such as to the undergrounding fund. In my opinion, this is actually more valuable than a site on, say, Lee Highway. I'm just going to use that by way of example. If you want to go zone a site on Lee Highway, you've got to spend the $1 million and you don't know what you're going to end up with. The difference here is you're going to spend the $1 million, you're going to offer up the same community benefits, but you know what you're going to end up with. And if at any time it seems like a bad bargain, you just withdraw your 4.1 site plan, your final site plan. And so I am somewhat familiar with values of, we would call this raw ground, because it's not zoned, it's not infrastructure. And the values that I got from some of the projects I'm aware of and some of the developers I've talked to, I actually think the county is perhaps a little bit generous with the 60%. And according to what I've ascertained out there, you probably are more at 50% would probably be a more accurate establishment of value. However, as the applicant noted, there are some special considerations for this particular site. It is kind of isolated and so forth. So my own analysis and from being a participant in the zoning process here in Arlington, I think where the county is probably appropriate. With that, I'll shut up and hear what others have to say.
Okay, thank you. Other folks? Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, and kind of in the back of my head was, can we raise the assessment a little bit to get to an FAR value that is more in line with the market? But I'm okay leaving it where the county is. I think Barnes kind of said it all as far as the PDSP and the value in that. I just wanted to add to that the comments about the office market and COVID and all that stuff. It's kind of like, this is a land bank. You're in there at an assessment of $43 an FAR. You're saying it's 35. You've actually got some income on the property, which is a great bonus versus just being raw land. So, even if you sit there and pay taxes on the land with no income for 30 years, you're still, below that $65 a square foot number that the county uses in its guidelines today. So I don't have a ton of sympathy for, we're in an office downturn. Owner's just going to wait for the downturn to come back around and the right time to pull the trigger. So I'm okay with the county.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. Mr. Lawson?
Yeah, I was just going to add one more thing, and that is that it is a practice of the county to allow trading of, like, for example, hotel. Right now, hotel, nobody's buying any hotel. But if you did come in for a 4.1 final site plan tomorrow, my guess is the county would allow that to be exchanged for whatever else it is you might want to do. And what the county does, because I've done this a couple times, is they'll say, okay, well, you have one hotel unit that's worth blank. We'll give you 2 apartment units because the value's equal, or we'll give you 1.7, whatever. And they have a formula that they will apply. I'm not saying it's a right, you don't have a right to it. But if conditions are such that, everybody knows right now we got more hotel than the market will absorb, they would probably do that for you. And there are standards that the county has. That condition that we read was referencing county policies. And so we who do this for a living, we kind of know what the county's going to seek, how much they're going to ask for, and so forth. With that, again, I'll be quiet.
Okay, thank you. Other folks, anything different or? No? All right, then I'm ready to entertain a motion.
All right, so we're gonna act on each of these three cases individually.
Correct, yep, we're
Okay.
on.
I'll make the motion to confirm the county's reduced number, actually the county's number of 16,573,200.
Okay, I'll second that. Motion and a second to confirm the first case. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, that is 5-0. It's unanimous. The county's confirmed at 16,573,200. The second case is RPC 16039-034 on North Kent Street. Would somebody like to make a motion? Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, motion to confirm 4,590,500.
Okay, I'll second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous, 5-0. The county's confirmed at 4,590,500. And the third case, RPC 16039-035 at 1611 North Kent.
All right, motion to confirm 20,575,700.
Okay, I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, again, unanimous, 5-0. The county's confirmed at 20,575,700. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much for allowing us to present the cases together. I can tell you that we have also, as a result, spared you the additional cases of additional parcels for this subdivision, which we will withdraw. So thank you for your time.
Moving forward, though, Ms. Foreman, if you're going to make a change like that, I would prefer to get it the day before. You must have known you were doing this because you had a 15-minute presentation done rather than 2 minutes before. It just kind of is disruptive to the whole situation, and we'll confirm time-wise and things like that. But we could do that beforehand rather than right before we're trying to go on the air.
You
Okay.
bet.
Thank you. Is Mr. Steinhauser here?
Good morning.
Oh, there he is. Good morning. Okay, the fourth case on the agenda is RPC. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, is Mr. Chicas here? Oh, no. There he is. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. The fourth case on the agenda then, resuming to RPC 17005-012, the property at 1530 Clarendon Boulevard. Mr. Steinhauser, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The subject property is Sedona Slate apartment buildings up in Roslyn. It's 2 high-rise apartments on 1 RPC, 419 market rate apartments, 55 affordable units, or approximately 11.5%, and 10,625 square feet of retail. I would ask everyone to flip to page 44 of 99, and that's where my appeal materials begin. So just to, quickly walk you through the property, take a look at the CoStar summary report on page 45. You'll also see a summary of their asking rents for studios, 1 beds and 2 beds right there. You can feel free on page 46 to take a look at some of the market conditions, vacancy rates, year over year, asking rents, etc. Again, on page 46. My income approach is on page 49. And you can see my income approach is on the left and the county's original income approach is on the right. This is for the apartment portion, and I'll walk you through it from top to bottom. So the biggest issue here is that we believe the assessor's PGI does not consider the significant anywhere from 13 to 15% year over year decline in market rents from 1/1/20 to 1/1/21. This is true both in the market and specifically at this property. Rents for smaller units, including efficiency and 1-bedroom units, decreased the most significantly as a result of a lot of renters just moving out of the city, looking for larger places to live, you know, when they're realized after a while that they're going to be both living and working and spending most of their time in one small apartment. Concessions on both new leases and renewals have also increased to near all-time high levels in the market, with many buildings, such as this one, offering up to 2 free months on a 1-year lease, again at a discounted rent. So as a result, we've made the following changes at the subject. We changed for the market rate apartments, we changed for the efficiency units, we've lowered the rent to $1,775, the assessor's using $1,900. And for 1-bedrooms, we lower the rent to $2,050 per month, and the assessor is using $2,300. Again, feel free to look at the CoStar report I originally mentioned for the subject property on page 45, where you'll see that the asking rents were $1,783 for studios and $2,022 for 1-bedrooms. And frankly, what I often find is that what's listed on CoStar is higher than what they're actually getting at the property. Again, that's more of an asking rent. So ultimately, it makes a difference in the PGI of roughly 400,000 or slightly more. Again, that's going to be the biggest appeal issue that we discuss here today. Second issue, the assessor did lower their vacancy and collection loss for high-rise apartment from 6% to 5% in 2021. We don't believe this reflects the market as of 1/1/21 whatsoever, and in fact, the assessor should have increased this rate. The guidelines say that concessions are captured within the 5% vacancy and collection loss. To put this into perspective, the subject property was 6.4% vacant on the 1/1/21 date of value. The submarket was 8.2% vacant. This does not even include collection loss, which was significantly higher given the moratorium put in place by CDC on evictions. And it doesn't include concessions at all, which we just, as described before, were all the way up to 2 months on a 1-year lease. So the assessor's 5% rate, frankly, is way too low. We're stipulating to that number today just to try and find some, common areas. But if this case were to go further, we're withholding the right to use a higher rate there. The assessor, I appreciate Mr. Chicas for his work. At the first level, he did adjust the operating expenses upwards, and we are now in agreement on those. So that is no longer an issue. The second to last issue is the cap rate. The county is using the same cap rate as last year. It's a sub-4 cap rate. We're not seeing that in the market or on any sales. We looked at both surveys and sales, and we're at 4.5%. Finally, there is a personal property component at this building, as there are with many new apartment buildings. They pay personal property tax on $352,852. If we're supposed to be valuing the real estate only here, the personal property component has to be deducted below the line, and we've done that here. And so originally, we were in agreement with the assessor on his income approach for the retail portion, and that wasn't an issue. What you will see now is that the value on that portion has been increased significantly as a result of the assessor adding $115,000 in pass-through income that was previously zero. We would ask the board to look at the actual retail income from the past 4 years. It's never been nearly that high. The reported retail income is inclusive of those reimbursements. So we would ask that be removed completely. So those are the main issues, and I will just briefly show you a few of the articles that we've attached for support. Page 54 of 99 is just that business personal property bill, proving the value that we showed of $352,852. Page 60 of 99 and 61 of 99 specifically show a change in rents by Washington submarket, by the different neighborhoods. You'll notice on the graph, Gaithersburg, Alexandria, Reston, and you look all the way to the bottom and you will see Roslyn, where this property is located. It is, in fact, the market rents were down between 13 and 15% in Roslyn, and that has not been reflected in the assessment. One final article is the apartment list national rent report. You will see on page 71 of 99, again, Arlington, Virginia, just in December alone, rents were down 2.4%, and overall in the year, they were down 14.8%. I mean, we could go on and on with the articles. They all say the same thing. Rents were down, concessions were up. Tying this all back quickly just to the test, the biggest issues are the rents on the efficiency in 1-bedrooms, this additional retail pass-through income that should be removed, cap rate, and personal property adjustment. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chikas for the county, please.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, board members. Good morning, Mr. Steinhauser. So we are speaking about Sedona Slate. Mr. Steinhauser went over it fairly succinctly. Fairly new development, 9 years old. Essentially, again, as Mr. Steinhauser noted, it's 2 buildings essentially kind of operating as one. It's a bit unique in that residents of Sedona can use Slate amenities and vice versa. They do try to keep this as a little bit distinct, but nothing that would effectuate a difference in valuing them as far as rental rates, etc. Really, this will come down to the summary sheet, as the board members are familiar with. I tend to rely heavily upon that, as this is the actual operating history that is reported by the owner. If we look at the revision, columns G1, G2, G3, especially as compared to the appellant's columns H1 and H2, you can see that, as Mr. Steinhauser noted, we're fairly in agreement, at least in regards to operating expenses. You know, I did note in their 2020 submission that they did include some $250,000 or so of what would be considered CapEx. This is roof repair, installation of security fobs, cameras, etc. It does look like Mr. Steinhauser noted that as well and smoothed that out as far as a stabilized operating expense. I would note that is still a bit above the 3-year average, and that's 18, 19, and 20. And that's, again, even if you include the operating expenses that we would consider capital expenses in column E. So again, a 3-year average would put them much closer to 3.9 as opposed to the 4 million or so that Mr. Steinhauser suggests. I would note and ask the board to note too that even in this COVID year, pandemic year, revenue went up across the board. It was achieving stabilization into this period. You can actually see that the vacancy dropped 6.9, about 5, back to 6, and then actually dropped almost 0.5% in 2020. And that was without concessions. Mr. Steinhauser noted that there were some severe concessions being offered to sort of get rents where they were. I would note that it appears even as of today, rents have not only increased, concessions are down to offering, I believe it's amenity fees being waived. So as the board is familiar, we did make adjustments, essentially squashing the gross potential by over almost $500,000 to get to a stabilized effective gross. Well within the stabilized range that has been actuated at the property the last 3 years. We still are within, it looks like it's about a 1% drop from last year's actual reported effective gross. And again, that was with the year that they actually dropped vacancies and reported no concessions. As Mr. Steinhauser noted, we did increase operating expenses by quite a bit, almost $260,000 or so, equating to, again, on par with the last 3 years reported by the owners. And again, very much on par with the last 3 years reported for net operating income. We did note, again, if you look in columns F, if you smooth out those capital expenditures, the net operating income that's indicated is very much on par with what was achieved in years 2018, 2019. Briefly touching on what Mr. Steinhauser noted with the difference in pass-throughs. If you'll look at page 6 of 99, you'll see the retail rent roll. Now that, of course, is provided by the county, but you can also see the owner's rent roll on the subsequent pages, page 7 and 8. Not only do they list a base rental rate, they also list the pass-throughs that are very common in retail rental agreements. You have operating expenses, which are going to be considered pass-throughs, and you have some of these things like taxes that are going to be considered pass-throughs. If you take those numbers and you add them to the monthly recovery table, as you can see again on page 6, you do get monthly recoveries in the area of about $9,900, which equates to the number that is used. In fact, we're a little bit low based on what they've reported. We're not casting aspersions on the owner, but it would appear that, as Mr. Steiners noted, the owner is claiming that they're including that in the I&E, but one thing is going to be missing. Either the rental rates that they're including in the rental roll is not being achieved, or the operating expenses are not being collected. The pass-throughs are not being collected. So we do believe that our revaluation, if you will, our revision in column G3 is more accurate, especially again concerning it's pulled from the owner's rental roll themselves. Lastly, when we come to our summation, we see that our revision called for a fairly succinct 1% to drop year over year. Again, very much NOI is very much in line with what they've achieved the last 3 years, whereas we think the appellant was a bit too aggressive in their call of a revision of over 15% drop in value. It just doesn't seem warranted. Their roughly $9.5 million NOI. This property has not achieved anything that low in the last 4 years. In fact, the lowest number there is still higher than that by over 500,000. We do believe that based on the fact that this property does seem more stabilized, in fact, than others that we've seen this year, given that their vacancy actually dropped year over year, given that their income increased year over year, given that their effective gross has increased 3 years in a row. We do believe that the revision made by the county was appropriate. We do believe that the revised value of $190,904,000 is accurate and should be confirmed as fair and equitable. Anything to add, Irving?
No, I think you summed it up pretty good.
Thank you, board members. We're available for questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, questions from any board members? No? Oh, Mr. Hoffman.
Chris, did you touch on the personal property tax comment that he made about, is that double? What's going on there?
No, sir. Yeah, I mean, it's just sort of a agreement to disagree. I know Mr. Steinhauser and Ryan Tax has done a couple of properties. I would say it's not normalized. We've seen that from no other apartment owners. That's not something we've done in practice at my time in the county. I understand the theory of it, but I think that slippery slope is that every commercial entity that has a commercial tax would then apply that and say that you shouldn't count that. But the idea of going into a lease office and standing without furniture in it, or I don't know where they think their employees would work. Okay. There's going to be a component to that, but it's this 352,000 or so is I'm not sure how he believes that's being taxed as far as the real property in the valuation of the apartment. Says there's no component attributable to it. But long answer, no, we did not.
Okay, Grant, that's the 352? Is that like fitness equipment, furniture, stuff like that? And the owner pays a personal property tax bill for all that equipment every year?
Yeah, it's similar to a hotel. They have chairs by the pool and tables and, fitness equipment. That's what it is.
But if I may say, and I don't want to be argumentative, it's just the difference with the hotel is, of course, that's a furnished apartment in a sense. I mean, that it cannot exist without having that furniture, fixture, and equipment. It's part of the return on investment. That's the sort of the basis of hotel valuation. Whereas again, this is a bit of a novel idea of deducting it. It's not been approached by any other owner that you've seen this year, by any other appellant. It's really only by Ryan LLC.
It's not a novel idea. It's just too small for anybody to go to court over, frankly. I mean.
Okay, just to clarify on that, Mr. Chikas, didn't the county used to deduct that And then they made a policy change that they stopped doing that. And from the
Mr. Bailey
standpoint
can
of
correct me if I'm wrong,
equalization,
but yeah, Mr. Bailey can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we still do that on furnished units. So if an apartment has furnished units in which they, again, it's much more comparable to a hotel and that they have equipment that is going to be depreciated, then we will do that. But if Mr. Steinhauser is talking about the equipment that's in the lobby, the chairs that are used by the leasing office, pool equipment, this is stuff that I think you're going to find that is necessary to get the effective rents that they're asking. So we've not seen any apartment that has used this again, other than Mr. Steinhauser's clients.
right, I guess the point I'm just trying to make is that years ago, you did used to do that, but now
Again,
don't do.
So it was kind of like a back and forth thing. We didn't do it, and then at one point discussing with the agent about particularly a furnished apartment that had furnished units, we started doing the deduction. And after realizing that so we did it for a while, and then we said, you know what, this is only for properties that have furnished units, and we can see the rent difference between a 3-bedroom and a 3-bedroom furnished. So therefore, we can see that this furniture actually attributes to the value of the property. So you're correct, Mary. There was a little bit of back and forth for a while where we did do it.
But to be clear, we still do it. We still do it on furnished units. Yes, ma'am.
Correct. Right. And so just from a standpoint of equalization, so there's no other properties.
This
That's
year,
correct. That's correct. You're correct, Mary. You're correct.
I just wanted to make sure. Okay. Thank you. Other questions? No? Okay, Mr. Chicas, if you take a minute to wrap up.
Yes, ma'am. Again, looking at the property, revenue went up across the board, apartments, retail, parking income, other income, even utility reimbursement, gross potential went up. Effective gross is up 3 years in a row. We smoothed out the operating expenses to include those which we would consider capital expense. So even though we reconstructed them out, we still take that 3-year average. The NOI that's resultant, and again, revision is much in line with years 18, 19, and 20. Again, if you smooth out the capital improvements, we do believe that the revised value shows a year-over-year decrease of 1%, much more in line with what's going on at the property, as opposed to the appellant's 15% year-over-year decline. We do believe that the revised value of $190,904,000 should be confirmed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Steinhauser, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, the main issue here are the rents. I barely heard that addressed whatsoever by the assessor. I've shown in my appeal package multiple pages of support that rents were down at the property year over year by almost 15%, specifically on the efficiency in 1-bedroom units, and concessions were up as well. This all happens, in the second half of the year. So yes, I mean, the entire 2020 income statement doesn't reflect that. But we're looking at the property on a specific date. We're not supposed to be looking backwards. We're supposed to be looking forwards. What are we going to assume for rents as of January 1st, 2021? I mean, it's staring us literally right in the face. So I would ask that the board take a close look at the rents and the rents that the county has applied. I mean, they're using $22.50 for 1-beds and then $23.50 for 1-bedroom pluses. There's not enough of a gap there. I would also say, please look at column E on the test sheet. You'll see the NOI at the property actually went down. The assessor keeps mentioning that there were CapEx included in the operating expenses. I'm not sure since when is fixing a leaky roof a capital improvement. But again, I would ask you to look at that. Please look at the retail income as well. It's never achieved the amount that the assessor is using. Those are the two biggest issues. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, it's just among the board members. I mean, I'll start on this. I'll be honest, I don't feel the original assessment is that far off. I mean, I look at this and think it's pretty stabilized, and I think the revised is generous from the county. To look at the individual, amounts being, assessed per the different types of units. I mean, that may be off, but the bottom line is the GPI and the, NOI is certainly in line with how it's been performing over the last 3 years. And for the appellant to say, oh, why are we looking backwards? We always look for a trend. So we would look back to the past 3 years. So I would disagree with that, but I myself think the revision from the county is generous. What's everybody else think? Mr. Penaranda.
I agree with you, Mary, and I think, most of the time in cases like this, I retest a couple of ways based on rental rates and expenses. But, to be honest, I think I have to give to Mr. Chicas. I think of all the cases that I've seen this year, I think this is probably one of the best reconstructions. And, looking at the rental rates, I don't really see that they are out of line. They're within the range of what the appellant reported, what they're getting, not necessarily what, the reports are saying that rents are going to be going down, or that's what they're getting. So I think they're within the range, and I don't see anything, I think it's a good reconstruction. I have to give a thumbs up to Mr. Chicas.
Okay, other folks? Mr. Lawson.
Yes, ma'am. I likewise looked at, how can I reduce this? And every time I came up with an idea, it just didn't seem to go anywhere. So I'm also okay with the county's assessment.
Okay, anybody else? Mr. Hoffman.
Same thing. I thought there would be an actual bigger dip in 2020, but the NOI is there. That's really where we saw the biggest hit on the efficiencies in one bedrooms. So I would have thought it would have played out in the 2020 NOI. And so, if you cap out 2020, you're at right about where the county is, maybe a little bit higher. Initially thinking maybe we could look forward and try to take something off on prospective future rents or whatever, but we didn't see it in 2020, and everything we've got going right now is actually going back up. So, obviously that wasn't the case on January 1, but we do have the 2020 data to look at. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Mr. Yates. You turn your microphone on.
I'm sorry. I originally went through and looked at the numbers and tried to see where the inconsistencies might show up. And I was fine with the numbers. It just did not seem to stand out that there was a big discrepancy somewhere. It balances out well. And rents are, and I agree, 2020 did make it. It just didn't. I mean, hey, if the appellant's right and things change next year, then that's something we have to look at. But right now, it doesn't show it.
Okay. All right. I'm going to allow somebody else to make the motion because I would confirm the original assessment, and I feel you guys are leaning towards the revision. I don't know where everybody is on that, but
I'm going to go ahead and make a motion, Mary, that we reduce the assessment to $190,904,000 even.
Yeah.
Second.
okay. A motion and a second by Mr. Lawson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So it's unanimous. The assessment is reduced to the county's revision of $190,904,000 even. Thank you.
Thank you, board members. Thank you, Mr. Steinhauser.
Okay, we have Mr. Bailey still on.
Yes, I am here.
All right, thank you. Okay, the fifth and final case for the day is RPC 140130022, the property located at 4601 Fairfax Drive. Mr. Steinhauser, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to ask everyone to flip to page 34 of 74 and my appeal materials start there. The subject property is known as Ballston 1, office building built in 1986, approximately 238,067 square feet of rentable space, predominantly office space, and then a very small retail portion. The property physically 16% vacant as of 1/1/21. We used an income approach to value the property, same as the assessor. Again, I've included the CoStar report with all the spaces available on pages 35, 36, and 37. And everyone's welcome to take a look at. Income approach on the following page. You'll see the 4 years of actuals from left to right, and the county's income approach and ours after that. So there are really sort of two big issues here. The one first being that the GSA, or which is the DHS specifically, is the anchor tenant at this building. They occupy approximately 32% of the building, or 76,976 square feet. Their lease expires in September 2021. While the owner is hopeful that they may, stay past September, in some sort of short extension, it is publicly known that the DHS will ultimately consolidate in the new St. Elizabeth's campus in DC. This has a profound effect on the value of the property, as you essentially have a lame duck anchor tenant. The space will need refurbishment, once DHS leaves, and would likely need to be broken up for multi-tenant use, as the odds of finding a tenant to take 77,000 square feet are, slim to none right now. In terms of the actual rents, we use the same rents as the assessor. We thought they were reasonable. We adjusted the cafe rent down to the actual rent, and we see the assessor has done that as well in his revision, so there's no issue there. Unfortunately for me, this is mainly a cap rate case. Not only, is the anchor tenant leaving, they have had significant issues with existing tenants that, are physically in the building, but were, failing to pay rent over the course of 2020. Those three tenants are Maiden Tech, Suite 1030. They occupy 77,399 square feet. They were behind on 9 full months of rent as of December 31st, 2020. And their lease technically expired February 28th. They knew as of 1/1 they would be leaving at the end. Accenture Federal Services, Suite 1100, 4,996 square feet. Confirmed in 2020 that they would be moving out at the end of their lease in April. The third and largest of the three, Ballston 1200 Suites, Suite 1200, tenant had only paid 50% rent for 8 months and up until 12/31/20, and was not expected to make it. So the space was put on the market, on 30 days notice for rent. So in addition to the anchor tenant, knowing that they're going to leave, you have three that were known at the time would be physically in the property, but would be vacating in 2021, predominantly due to lack of rent payment. We attempted to quantify, just the releasing costs alone for those three tenants, which we knew would be leaving in 2021, at $70 per square foot for TIs and leasing commissions at 5 years at 6%. The total cost just for those three tenants was $2.6 million. We did not deduct the lease-up costs for the GSA, though if by doing the same calculation, it's about additional $6.2 million. We predominantly account for that with a higher cap rate of 6.5%, which we feel is supported by the market. I should add, specifically for this case, there is an appraisal as of the date of value that I provided to the assessor. The value is $72.7 million. I spoke to the asset manager for this property when they're preparing to actually take this property to market, and they told me best case scenario is low 60s to sell this property. That's best case scenario. So the assessor, is not accounting for these significant leasing costs that will need to be done by a buyer of this property, but the market is saying, yes, when we look at this property to buy it, we're including these costs in our purchase price. which is the definition of fair market value. I'm not going to drag everybody through the rest of the appeal package, but it's similar articles, talking about the DC office market in very bad shape, rents down, vacancies up, et cetera, as well as our cap rate support. The main issue here, again, cap rate and those additional lease-up costs for vacating tenants. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bailey for the county, please.
All right, good morning again. I'll be following up to what Mr. Steinhauser talked about, which was Boston 1 office building. On this property, we received the 2020 information. This property owner reports net effective rents for 2018, 19, and 2020. They do not report the vacancy. As you can see in columns B, C, and E, at the top of each column, we notated the net leasable area that's reported to us on the I&Es, along with the vacant space that's reported on each I&E. You will see in 2017, the property was 29% vacant. 2018, the property was 23.7% vacant. And 2019, it was 17.1% vacant. As of 2020, the vacancy had decreased a little bit more to, I think we have it at 15%, or close to, not 15%, a little bit more than 15%. So in our valuation of this property, we're using 20% vacancy. When you look at the original assessment compared to what they reported on 2020, our office revenue for occupied space is about $400,000 less than what they reported. The vacant office is added to our assessment, whereas they don't report vacant potential. So that's why the GPI is less than what they reported for 2020. When you look at the actual NOI that we utilize when we value this property for 2021, we're about $500,000 less than what they reported for 2020. As the agent stated, there was an appraisal for the property by the owners. That appraisal on a DCF method came in with a value of $72 million. Sorry. $72,700,000. The actual direct cap approach that they utilized in this very appraisal was $77,400,000. That value was reached after deducting lease-up costs and other things by the actual appraiser. There was an actual value of $87,812,415. This was the fourth quarter appraisal. They deducted $9.4 million for lease-up discount and then another $970,000 for COVID to get to the $77,400,000. You can see in our test that we are close to that actual number that he provided because the rents that they are achieving were higher than what we used in the original assessment. So that's how we got to the $77,305,000 in our test column, but we're asking the board to take the $76,720,300 on the original assessment. And that's pretty much all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Lawson.
Thank you. I want to ask the county this first. As you noted, the actual income was higher than the assessment and also the applicant's suggestion. However, the applicant is placing emphasis on the fact they're going to lose a really big tenant in the near future. What weight, if any, does the county give that?
So we looked into DHS leaving. We know that their lease expires around the end of the year. So as of January 1, they were a tenant on the rent roll. As far as them vacating the building, we looked to the I&Es to see if there's been communication back and forth about them leaving. There was no indication on the I&E that they would leave this year. We know that GSA has in the past done extensions such as TSA out in Pentagon City. when they were looking to move, they did do an extension with them to where they stayed longer. So as of 1/1, I mean, we know they're leaving, but we don't know the time period in which they're leaving. Typically, they'll say they're leaving this year. When we have that information, like they're leaving this year, we have utilized that information and made discounts or applied discounts below the line for that tenant vacating.
Okay, let me ask the owner, the applicants, and when you hire appraisals, do the appraisers factor that in?
Yes. I mean, the appraiser is role essentially is to mimic what the market would do, and they would tell you that's what the market does. Obviously, I mean, I don't argue with Irving at all. We don't know 100% that they're leaving at the end of their lease. They could stay another year.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. That's all I had.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, I'm just for the county. You kind of touched on this, but 2020 assessment was 68,623,700. 2021 is 76,720,300. So what was the value added between 2020 and 2021? What was that based on?
Hold on 1 minute. So the 2020 assessment had below the line deductions. There was an assumption that there was higher vacancy. Let me see. So we used a 25% vacancy rate in 2020, and we did below the line discounts of 1.47 million. The estimated vacancy was 53,853 square feet of vacancy when we did the 2020 assessment. Whereas you can see for 2020, the assessment was lower. I mean, the vacancy was lower than that.
Okay, so last year you had excess of 25% vacancy, so there was a
Yes.
below line.
Yes.
Okay. It just seemed like a big jump.
It was the 25% plus the below the line, and then pretty sure the rent rate was, the rent rate was in line with what we used in the test. So that was the biggest difference. Vacancy rate and below the line deduction. And actually, let me correct that. The vacancy was actually 61,106 in the 2020 assessment, not 53. It was 61,106 attributed to vacant office space. And so that resulted in the below the line deduction. And as you can see, based off of the summary sheet, their vacancy wasn't that low. It wasn't that high.
Okay, other questions? No? Okay, Mr. Bailey, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
I mean, on this property, we took a look at the information provided. We made adjustments to the rent based off of the actual lease rent being higher than what we used in the 2021 assessment. We are applying a 20% vacancy rate on this space. NOI is less than what they achieved in 2019 and 2020 when you look at the history of the property. The value of 76,720,300 is what we're asking the board to take. We asked if you consider the information submitted, especially with the appraisal. The appraisal for fourth quarter by their own appraiser came in at around 77,800,000 on the direct cap approach. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Steinhauser, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Certainly, yeah. The value conclusion from the appraisal was 72.7 million. And we can't just pick and choose specific approaches. The value conclusion on page 3 of the appraisal is 72.7 million. Thanks. The two issues, again, We believe the assessor is using a below market cap rate. Frankly, don't expect the board to change that. The second issue are leasing costs for vacating tenants. Again, I agree with the assessor. We don't know 100% as of 1/1/21 that the GSA was leaving in September. We knew that they were going to leave at some point. We didn't know 100% in September. That's why in the lease up calculation that I did on page 42 of 74, I only included the 3 tenants that we knew for a fact were leaving. And that's because they had failed to pay rent. And the owner told me they will be leaving in early 2021. The spaces were all listed for rent as of 1/1/21. So that's the lease up calculation that I did. And it equated only for TIs and leasing commissions, it equated to 2.7 million. I would hope at the very least the board would consider deducting that amount, since the assessor said that is something they would typically consider. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. It's just among the board. What's everybody think? Mr. Hoffman.
I mean, I'm just on the history. I look at this. We saw this case in 19. We reduced it to 69 million. In 20, it was the county came to the conclusion it was 68 million, and I just don't see any reason why it should be any higher than that today. Now that we have probably some pretty big impending vacancy staring them in the face. So, I like the 2020 assessment. I think that's fair. How we get there, maybe we can discuss that.
Okay, other folks? Excuse me. Mr. Panorama?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see how we can just go back to a number because it looks better. We don't know how we arrived to those numbers, how the county arrived on 2 years ago, what deductions were made below the line or what allowances. We're looking at different rates, different cap rates, different numbers. I mean, we can't just look at what it was last year and say, we just think it's too high. We have actual numbers here, and I think we should go by that. And, I think I'm okay with the current assessment.
Okay, Mr. Lawson, you had your hand up. Oh. Mr. Yates, go ahead.
Jose, how do you, what they know are going to be vacant units, and a lot of it? You don't think that's a valued adjustment?
I'm sorry, you cut off a little bit. Say that again?
I'm sorry. How do you look at the units that are vacant? And really immediately, considerable amount of space that has to be released at this time in the market.
I think it's like with, many of the cases that we've seen, we know that some people are going to be leaving. We don't know if they're going to have a renewal. It's hard to tell, we don't know what tenants they have lined up, if there's any, which, of course, that information doesn't come to us unless there's a lease signed.
Well, that's valid, but the fact that they would renew after months of rent already at the point of the first, they probably aren't renewing. And that, usually having a lot of vacancy. I think should have some consideration.
Right, I see where you're going with that, Mr. Yates. My only concern is, we have other properties that we know tenants are leaving, and we always say, well, we'll see what's reported, because as Mr. Penaranda said, it could get released. We don't know. I mean, I agree with you. I don't believe they're going to renew, since they've already said they're not. But it's kind of like the cart before the horse to anticipate that they're not going to have income on that space, because we don't know. And so, although I'm sympathetic to it, I think it puts it out of equalization with everybody else that we've said, no, we're going on what we knew as of January 1. So, Mr. Lawson, you put your hand up twice.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chairman. The reason I didn't respond before, I was in the middle of doing some math based on Jose's comment. I think, I've thought about this and what I try, kind of my check, so to speak, is to look at two things. What did they make? What did they actually earn this year or last year? I mean, and then compare that to, okay, this goes on the market today. Is it going to be saleable for what the county says? And I think that if this goes on the market today, they're not going to get, 77,000. And I hear what you and Jose are saying, and I recognize that like 2 years ago, it's speculative. I don't think today it's speculative. You're going to lose the tenant, and there's no market for a tenant to come in and replace them. In fact, they're probably going to get requests to reduce space. And so I think there should be a reduction. And what I did was took the applicant's figure and then applied the county cap rate. I got 75,817,662. Then I deducted the 2,640,000 for the year rent loss, ended up at 73,177,020. And I mean, we could just stop at using the county cap rate. I kind of think, my own analysis, I think we should go to the 73,177,000.
All right, other folks? Mr. Hoffman.
I mean, we've done that before where we've looked at the appellant's pro forma and then applied the county cap rate. So it's not like that's an unusual thing.
Well, I think it is unusual in this case when it's the NOI is lower than what was achieved in 2019 and which was what was reported in 2020.
Yeah.
By a significant amount of money.
I would just say that any buyer looking at this property is going to look at that 76,000 leased by DHS and basically say that whole thing's got to be redone and released, and there's a bunch of costs involved in that. We're not even going there. And there's a big co-working suite in here, and that's another big kind of scary factor to a buyer, which is, it's another WeWork in there. The co-working is not exactly flourished. So you take their income and you discount it, and you say, maybe I recover some of that, but there's no way they're paying full rent for the whole term.
Maybe another suggestion is take the county's test and deduct from it the 2,640,000. Excuse me.
I don't know what it.
I think again, I think that's really assuming that it's actually going to happen. We, like both sides agreed, they may very well extend for another period. We don't know. It's, we're speculating on something that it's for sure going to happen.
Mr. Yates?
They may very well re-rent those spaces. I'm not thinking they're going to, but they could. But then you've got the larger vacancy that we know is going to come. It may not be this year. And it's just no way the market's going to look at this and that value. There's too many variables in there that's just saying this value would not hold in the market. Potentially, yeah, the 2020 looks good. If you didn't know anything, I'd agree with you. But there's too many variables that I think just are going to cut this price of this building down. And it's just what the market would buy it at.
I think if that happens, I think the deduction should be made next year, not this year.
Right, I agree with you, Mr. Henrietta, but I do have some concern over the fact that the assessment's going from 68 million to 76 million. I mean, that is a pretty big jump.
The building, not dead, but dying, leaning on having problems.
Right. Well, the three of you seem to be on. Do you have an agreement that
Mary, why don't-
Barnes's last suggestion, or whoever made it, with moving that 2.6 over, might not be a bad one.
I was going
At
to,
least something.
make why don't I throw this out and see if there's 3 votes? Take the 2,640,000, move it over to the test, end up with 74,664, 400.
Okay, hold on one second. Okay, so did you all get that? 74,664,400.
400.
400.
I'll go ahead and make that motion that we reduce the assessment to the 74,664,400.
All right, I'll second it.
A motion and a second by Mr. Hoffman. All in favor? Excuse me. I'm really on the line, but I'm going to go for, and then opposed, Mr. Penaranda?
Yes.
I could have gone either way because it's going to go. But okay, so it's reduced to 74,664,400, and that's based on the county test column and reducing below the line the rent loss for the year. Okay, that completes the agenda today. Does anybody have any business either from the county or board members? No?
Oh, you know what? Excuse me.
Mr. Hoffman, go ahead.
I would just say if we see that Roslyn Place or Roslyn Plaza case again next year, maybe we should just call that an economic unit. I mean, I don't know why we didn't, but it might make sense to just consolidate it into one economic unit.
Well, I think the owner has to do that.
Okay.
We can't do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know where that was
I
coming
agree
from. I
with you,
figured there
but-
was a reason, but I mean, we ended up hearing them all together, so
Yeah.
same outcome, but okay.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. There is no meeting next Tuesday, correct, Rosa? Rosa?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right, then we will stand adjourned now at 10:49 and re-adjourn next Wednesday, September 22nd at 9 a.m.
Thank you, board. Thanks, Irving.
Thanks, Grant. Talk to you later. Thanks, board.